Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Swartwood here. Tonight, I am joined by the best-selling author of three novels, including Everybody Knows and The Last King of California. His first novel, the Edgar Award-winning She Rides Shotgun, was recently turned into a major motion picture starring Taron Egerton and is in theaters everywhere. That's right, it's your favorite writer and mine, Jordan Harper. Jordan, how the heck are you?
You know what? I'm doing all right now. And the world might not be, but here inside my air-conditioned little pod here, I'm doing all right. So, how about
Yes.
yourself though?
Yeah, staying busy, staying busy. So we're always gonna, I know when I reached out to you when the movie was coming out, I was like, hey, I know we had chatted, I think like a year ago, or I forget how long ago it was, and we really went in deep. For people who want to check that out, it's on somewhere on my YouTube channel. Like we went into how you got started with writing, your TV work, basically how the first novel came about after the short stories, and I don't want to have to recap. I mean, just as a quick recap for people, it was again, this doesn't happen a lot, I think, nowadays, but back then short stories were a lot easier sell, and your agent was able to take basically a bunch of your short stories, sell it to a publisher as a short story collection, which is of course the great Love and Other Wounds, and turn that into a two-book deal. So it wasn't like you wrote She Writes Shotgun and shopped it around, which is usually the way it worked there. So, well, we're certainly going to talk about that, and obviously the movie, which, first of all, very few, books or stories or whatever get optioned. And then from those, very a slim, a very small percentage actually gets turned into anything. And then an even smaller percentage gets turned into anything that's like good. So the fact that you had all this stuff, kind of like all the stars are aligned, it's getting great reviews, has a great cast. And of course, we're going to get more into that. But congratulations, man. That's huge.
Thank you. It really is, just a necessary marker in your in your career these days as an author. Not necessary, but it's certainly something that you want and hope for as an author these days, especially in the world of shattered media with no book reviewers. Who was it? Vanity Fair fired a bunch of critics today or yesterday. You
And
know,
AP is no
uh,
longer doing their stuff.
oh, that's the other one that came out today, like or yesterday. Which is a shame. And I'm not saying this in any way suitably replaces like the absolutely vital, critic, but we live in a very, very, very noisy world, and so anything that can kind of rise you to the level of attention to people, just so that you can catch their eye and it's basically life today is like staring at a TV screen, when it's tuned to a dead station, just the static. We basically just stare into one of those uh, all the time, and so anything that you can actually notice and pick out is huge, and it's an honor too. The first time I saw the movie in a movie theater, Nick Rowland, the director, and Taryn and Anna Sophia, who's amazing as Polly, were all there, and it was really kind of a sea change for myself internally to see them talk about the movie. And they knew I was in the audience and they said hey to me, but like it was really, I understood that the movie was theirs and that they had bled as much for the movie as I had bled for the book. And like that's an honor, like that somebody would take your work and care that much about it. I mean, Taryn has been doing press for this movie nonstop in an attempt to like make people watch this little indie film that like again, it's so hard to get people's attention today. And so I really am moved by that. I really was. It really, it really kind of made me understand fully that like the author needs to like step away and let the film be the film and let the filmmakers be the authors of the film.
Yeah.
Which I already kind of felt, but I really, I guess, really fully incorporated that into my beliefs that
Yeah.
night.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember, I think you may have shared on Blue Sky or somewhere. I had seen a clip of Taryn in an interview, like just gushing about the book. Like he was talking about, it's a great book. I love the book. I'm sure your publisher could probably use it as a blurb or something on a cover. Who knows?
I do
Because
have,
here's the
they are,
sad part about it, and I'll say it. You don't have to say it. Like, you could have, and you have a lot of great blurbs, obviously, for She Rides Shotgun, like really great famous authors that we know are famous. For a lot of, normal people out there who aren't really aware of this, those names don't mean anything. But if they see on a cover, oh, this actor they love, it's like, oh, that might get the attention. And the same thing, the great too about, the idea of having a book turned into a movie or a TV show. It's like, yes, it's a great another kind of like, notch on the belt or whatever. Like, it's something you want to have happen. But ideally, that's going to bring attention to people who never would have even heard of you, who never would have read your books, and then hopefully brings them to, your backlist. Like we talked really quick in the green room about a mutual friend, May Cobb. She had The Hunting Wives just recently came out. I know you had worked with the showrunner on, I think it was it
Hightown.
Hightown? You had done some
Well,
writing on.
I've actually Rebecca Cutter, who's the showrunner and creator of the TV show Hunting Wives,
Yeah.
is the person I have worked with more than anybody else in television. She was Bruno Heller's assistant when I interviewed for The Mentalist. So she was literally like the first person I met at that job as she took me to meet Bruno, and then she got promoted into being a writer on The Mentalist, and we were together on that. We worked together on Gotham, and then we worked together on Hightown. I was on seasons 1 and 3 of Hightown, which was her first show. So I've worked with Cutter a lot. I'm over the moon at how successful Hunting Wives is because she's a great writer and she has found what she is supposed to have been doing. So it's terrific.
Yeah. And I mean, for the author, May Cobb is really brought a lot of attention to her book. It's now,
Yeah.
like if you look at the rankings right now on Amazon, I mean, it's selling a ton of copies. Where I find that nowadays, because of streaming especially, sometimes stuff gets adapted and nobody even really knows it. Like I thought, I feel like May got really lucky here, and I feel it's probably a testament to probably Rebecca and just whoever else is involved that they really make it clear, like yes, this is based on a book. Where sometimes it feels like people come in and they're just like. We're not going to talk about that, and then just you might not even, or like a regular viewer might have zero idea it's based on a book or like a short story or a novella or whatever else, and then there's not really any sales. So kind of like that's the dream. Obviously you have something made, it becomes a huge deal. So let's jump back real quick and get into kind of the book aspect. So I remember telling you last time we talked, the very first book I had read of yours, even though I think I had She Rides Shotgun like downloaded on my Kindle, Everybody Knows, which obviously is a great book. And we're going to get into, I guess, kind of the follow-up, maybe a little bit later, right? A
Yep.
Violent Masterpiece. You shared the cover, great cover. That's going to be coming out next year. But then I had read your short story collection. And in the short story collection, I think actually I had to page through. The very first story deals with Aryan Steel, which is your kind of in the Jordan Harper multiverse type thing. Like Aryan Steele's like the bad white supremacist group. And then, when you read She Ride Shotgun, Aryan Steele obviously plays a huge part of that. So can you talk a little bit about just, you had to essentially pitch before you even wrote this? I mean, like, when did you have maybe the idea in your head? Was it initially going to be a short story, maybe a script? Because at that time you had been, writing TV. And then, like you kind of plays in this idea of Aryan Steele. Like, I mean, how much did you have in your head when you pitched it, you know, that it became this, if that makes sense?
No, I understand what you're saying, and I wish I had a more concrete answer for you other than, from the very beginning of my short stories, I was always intent on building a universe. I love fictional universes, and so I always wanted everything I wrote to kind of be interconnected one way or another, and most of everything I've done has been in some way. And Aryan Steel, which is, yeah, kind of my stand-in for the Aryan Brotherhood or the Aryan Circle or any of those, prison gangs based on white supremacy have always been the villains. I've talked a lot. We probably talked about last time, like my personal connection to like my older brother being assaulted by, Nazi supremacists and just growing up around a lot of racists. So I've been very comfortable making them the villains of my pieces for a long time. And Aryan Steele was one of the first pieces of that. And before I ever moved to California, honestly, when I was writing stuff more set in the Ozarks. And so when I ported my fiction over to the Inland Empire and writing about the dirty white boys outside of Los Angeles, bringing Aryan Steel and kind of formalizing them as more of a California gang they had been before was just like part of it. And I can't really tell you exactly the moment I decided that basically Lone Wolf and Cub, but set in the world of dirty white boys in Southern California was a good idea for a novel. Um, but that was the genesis, was basically very directly from Shogun Assassin, the amazing samurai film Shogun Assassin. I wanted to like take that energy and take that story and place it in the world that I like to write about. And it, my earliest things I have on file about She Rides Shotgun is from 2012. And the book was published in 2017. So at least back 5 years before publication date, I was thinking about it. And
Well, was it
so
just some chapters, or like had you done some scenes, or like specifically, well, what was it?
yeah, I mean, it's just like kind of rough chapters that I had, and I'd kind of taken a stab at it and then let it drop. And then, as you said, my amazing agent Nat Sobel was able to take a short story collection and sell it, which is really, yeah, is to your point, very hard to do today, and even then was pretty difficult. Um, and I think honestly, I was probably coasting off the buzz from Frank Bill's Crimes in Southern Indiana, you know. And so they were able to, Nat was able to sell that and get me a two-book deal. And I wrote up a two-page description. I don't think I even looked at the pages I'd already written. Um, and just, wrote like a two-page description of what I thought the story would be. And he included that with the submission package for Love and Other Wounds. And that put a deadline on me. And so I had to write the book. And that's a great thing to have in a lot of ways is necessity one way or the other.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. So okay, I think I read somewhere because you've been doing a lot of press. Well, I don't want to say a lot of press, but I mean, you've been doing
A
like
lot of press.
some interviews recently about, talking about the book and the movie adaptation. Um, well, first of all, just to be clear, this was obviously your first published novel. It won the Edgar. Congratulations again on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
But this was not like you had written a novel previously, correct? So that like this wasn't like the very first time you then had to sit down and write a novel.
Yeah, no, I had written a novel that kind of went under either the name Dirt Nap Avenue or The Cool Hand War, which neither one are great titles, I don't think. But and so I had written it and had worked with Nat trying to sell it. God, again, probably somewhere around 2010, like very early. It's terrible. Um, and I, me and Nat went back and forth on notes on it 4 or 5 times before I just kind of had the realization that it wasn't good enough. It just wasn't supposed to be. And so I put it away with really no regrets. I don't regret doing that. I think having a first novel that is just you working stuff out and figuring out what you're doing is totally fine. I'm sure there's some good writing in there, but it's a ludicrous novel in a lot of ways. Um, so I had done it, and it wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't easy when I wrote She Ride Shotgun, and it wasn't easy when I wrote The Last King of California. I keep waiting for it to get easy, and apparently that's just not what happens.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, let me ask you this. I mean, when you were working in TV, was it easy once you were, working on script 30 versus, script one?
Well, that is yes. First of all, and apologies to my TV writer friends. TV is so much easier to do than writing a novel. That was one thing novels taught me was that TV was a piece of cake. But no, you're right. By the time I wrote my 14th episode of The Mentalist, I was doing it at a pretty good clip. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and no, and there were a lot of ways that A Violent Masterpiece was easier than some of my other books. But still was it was like extracting something that had grown into your flesh. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, all right. So, for people who are not aware, so She Writes Shotgun. It's about Polly, who's 11-year-old, and her father, Nate, who is right out of jail. He basically has kind of a bounty on his head from the Aryan Steel, where not only do they want to kill him, they want to kill everybody. So she essentially leaves, if I remember correctly, she leaves school one day, and I think she's expecting her mom to be there, but instead it's her father, and he's basically like, "Get in the car," and then from there they're on the run. And
Hmm.
then, so I mean, from the very beginning, did you know? Like, was it always going to be a little girl, or was there a time where you maybe it was going to be a boy instead, like it was going to be Nate and his son?
No, and I can't, I wish I could tell you why that was, but no, there was never a period of time when I thought it was going to be a little boy. I think I find the dynamic of father and daughter much more interesting in this world. I think that, and this maybe says something about me, but I think it says more about the world we live in. The story of a dad teaching his son how to be violent is not transgressive in any way.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
absolutely.
and I wanted to kind of push on this transgressiveness of the concept that like some people need violence in their lives, and that violence, if it's liberatory, is not necessarily bad, even if it does bad things. And so for me, Polly was always going to be a girl. I also think, frankly, that Paper Moon was a big influence on this as well. That was aside from She Ride Shotgun. I think the other thing I thought about a lot was Paper Moon, and that is a father-daughter. And so I was always more interested in telling a story. I don't think I ever have anything written down or really even contemplated it being a boy.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I think it definitely is more interesting dynamic from a father because I know, and I think you had talked before. I mean, there is a little bit, or maybe I'd seen in some interview. I think it was maybe Taryn was on maybe Late Night with Seth Meyers or something, and they were talking about how I don't know where I saw this, but and maybe I'm wrong here, but where like in the movie Nate really he really does not want to like bring his daughter at all into this. You know, he wants to kind of keep her out. Whereas opposed in the book, he's a little bit more open to the fact that like if you want to survive, you have to do this. Where again, and again, I think it's more interesting with him having to have that dynamic with a daughter as opposed to with a son, where it's just like, oh yeah, of course he's going to teach his son how to do all this stuff. Where it's like, is he going to really teach his daughter to do? You know what I mean? Like so I think that was that was absolutely the right call on that. I and then we also talked food because I told you in the green room where I was like I want to get really nerdy about this. And I know last time we talked about how a lot of your recent stuff is much more third person present tense because I think you said that like coming from TV, it just makes more sense that way because a lot of scripts are more like present tense, whereas opposed to this was third person past tense. And I think you had said if you rewrote, I mean, if you were to write this nowadays, it would actually be present tense. Does that sound right?
I mean, that sounds right. I think I am not a violent masterpiece, but the book I'm planning right now is going to break with some of these things. But I did get very after She Writes Shotgun, I kind of fell into almost constant, yeah, third person present tense. It is so immediate. It just has a like a cinematic quality, which I think actually turns some people off, but I like that. I like the immediacy. I like feeling that it's right there in your bones, happening right now. And so, yeah, I think if I was somehow to write that book now, I, I mean, honestly, I haven't picked it up in a while, and maybe I should, because if you'd asked me, I probably would have said, "Oh, I'm sure it was first person present tense," because that's how I write. I had forgotten that I wrote that past tense. So that's interesting. I should go back and read. I haven't read it in years. It's a weird thing. Like, when do you go back and read your own work after you've kind of, again, once you've extracted it from your flesh, revisiting it's a kind of an odd thing.
Oh, I hate it because I will immediately see things where it's like I shouldn't have used that word, or like
Yeah.
maybe this scene could have ended like a couple paragraphs sooner. Or, you know what I mean? Like I'm constantly like recently I have an Audible original coming out and Audible let me like listen to the narrator do the entire book prior to it just to kind of see what I thought. And I remember like cringing at certain things. I mean, it was again nothing bad. The regular listener or reader is not even going to notice it. But I think as writers, we are so, I don't know about you, but like I'm just so overly critical, especially then coming back to stuff that I can then not change because it's like it's locked in, where it's like, like, ah, shit. I will say, of course, it's a great book. I mean, and it's a book I definitely, I think, personally, I will want to read at some point. I actually was thinking about trying to reread it before this, but I just didn't have the time. But yeah, you should be very impressed with yourself, Mr. Harper. So, but I
Thank
do want
you.
to talk about no. Okay, so let's talk about the title. We had talked about this before. It's such a great title. I know. Can you talk about the process? Because again, when you sold this, it was basically just on a two-page, like basically it was just a two-page pitch. Like I'm assuming at that time you did not really even have a title in place.
I,
So. And again, the reason She Red Shotgun, and I know we talked about this before, but I think it's really worth talking about, which again, I think it's great that for the movie, they kept that title. Um, I don't know. Can you talk about just kind of like where the title came from?
Yeah, I think when I sold it, the book has had multiple titles through its life. When I sold it, I think it was called Ride or Die. Um, and then at one point it was called Greenlit. And then the working title when I like submitted it and turned it in was If All Roads Were Blind, which is a quote from Bonnie Parker from Bonnie and Clyde. It's a quote from a poem. That's the epigraph of the novel,
Yeah.
is the stanza that has that line in it. And they felt, and I think they're probably correct, that that is too literary a title for the novel. Um, and I think that's, again, I like to sit in that area between literary and pulp. But I do think that's probably too far the other way. And so, they wanted a girl title. This was the heyday, or I think probably the tail end of the heyday of the girl titles, Girl on a Train, Girl with a Dragon Tattoo. Um, and I really didn't want to do that. The idea of doing something purely to chase a trend really was not appealing to me. But I did like the idea of like indicating the feminine in the title because it is the story of a girl in a very rough world. And so I kind of started playing with titles that had a feminine indicator in them that wasn't the word girl. And so that's where She Rides Shotgun came from. And I really do love that title. I think that it does exactly what it needs to do, which is like, tells you it's a girl, and you know that riding shotgun is not just like, oh, she's sitting in the passenger seat. Like you get the word shotgun into the title, and I think that's kind of what needs to be. Now, I will say I've learned some of the foreign titles of the book. In Japan, it is Daughter of the Handgun,
Yeah, that's not bad.
um, which I
I like that.
that's a good title. The Persian edition, I understand, is In the Time of Gunpowder and Torture, which
All
also a
right.
really good title. I do think like Daughter of the Handgun is like, oh, I wish I'd kind of thought of that one. She Writes Shotgun is very good. Daughter of the Handgun, also very good.
Well, and of course the UK. What was the UK? Something violence,
A Lesson in Violence.
lesson of violence. That's right.
I
Because yeah,
They said they people don't know what shotgun is, and I gave in. It was my first novel to be published, and I did give in on that. I regret, frankly, giving in on it. I think that I've never known what a reservoir dog is. Actually, I do. Like somebody told me recently that it's a slang for coyote. But I never knew that.
No, but and I mean, and this might be apocryphal, but I could have sworn Quentin Tarantino basically admitted that it doesn't mean anything. Like he just liked, he's like the Reservoir Dog. He just thought it felt, it just sounded
Yep,
cool, and
it
so
does
that's
sound
what I,
cool.
yeah,
Exactly, and that's all the title needs to do, and be evocative of what it is. And so, and frankly, it's just been very confusing for any fan of mine who might like
be in the
I've
UK.
had people say, "Oh, wow, I bought this book. I didn't know it was the same as the other book." And I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm sorry about that. I have it, I pressed on my contracts now for the UK that like they need to use the American
yeah.
title because I really I mean I'll get over it. I'll live, but I regret that piece of compromise right there.
Yeah. And also in terms of titles like Blade Runner, I remember like has nothing to do with the initial short story. In fact, I think Ridley Scott had heard or like it was basically Blade Runner was from something else. And
Yeah,
and they took it
I
and
have no
just seemed
idea.
like, they're just called Blade Runners, which again has nothing like it means nothing, but it sounds cool. But anyway,
Yeah, I was
yeah, were
just
you
gonna
gonna
say,
say something?
it kind of is like, in the initial internet boom, people were paying $5 million for the domain name www.books.com because they thought that's where people will go to buy books is books.com. Um, Although that's never been true in the history of the mercantile trade. It's like you don't buy books from books, you buy books from Amazon, you buy books from Barnes and Noble, you buy books from McNally Jackson. Like McNally Jackson, there's something about McNally Jackson that tells you it's a bookstore. It's a name. And you actually want to stand out. So yeah, I think people not that I'm a marketing genius, but sometimes you talk to people and I don't know if you've ever thought about how things actually sell in the real world.
Yeah, it's one of those things too where you can't really overthink it. You know what I mean? Like things just happen. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
like, again, Amazon. Who would have thought that that would be a thing now? Like, it's just synonymous. Oh, where'd you get that? I got it from Amazon.
yeah.
Like anybody who would not know, coming like, an alien coming down, like, what does that even mean? But of course, to us, it's. So let's talk about a little bit of the structure. Actually, before we get to the structure, did I read somewhere? I wouldn't say that probably more than 50% of the book's point of view is from Polly's point of view.
Yeah.
Now you also have other, POVs throughout, but initially, and correct me if I'm wrong, you wrote this more from Nate's point of view. So like how many drafts, you know what I mean? Like when you initially sat down, once you sold this, you realized like, okay, now I have a deadline. I have to, get to my computer. I need to start working. Um, like how far did you get into that initial draft before you realized, oh shit, I really need to kind of maybe, we need to tell this from more from Polly's POV.
Oh, I finished the draft. I mean, I've told this story before, but I was working on Gotham, the TV show Gotham, and I had finished the book, and I'd done that thing where you finish it and then you let the book sit, for 6 weeks and not looked at it. And then I had printed it out using the Gotham printer because, hey, save money. Um, and had taken it I sat down on the floor of my office at Gotham and started reading it and just turning pages over and putting them on the floor. And I think I was maybe 30 pages in when I knew that I had made a mistake, like a big mistake. Like I was like, this doesn't work. And it doesn't work because Nate is the wrong person to be telling this story. I knew exactly what it was. And I was so depressed because I knew I didn't need to read any farther. I knew I had to do a page one rewrite that I just kind of got up and I left it on the floor of my office. And my partner Megan, who I met on Gotham, like will tell the story of like coming in and it looked like a crime scene, that there was just this dead body in the corner of the room that nobody was talking about because I couldn't even pick it up off the floor. I just left it there for like I don't know, a couple of weeks anyway. And then I got over it. I got over the anguish of like knowing how much work I had to do. And then I sat down and I did it. I mean, if there's like a lesson that I would impart to people, it's that's the difference between a good book and a great book a lot of times is the willingness to like, yeah, no, I got to rewrite the whole thing now.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So did you, and remind me again, I know again we had talked about this previously, but do you outline or do you kind of just sit down and just start writing with an idea, with basically a destination in mind?
I outline, and I mean, again, I think a lot of that comes from working in television and
Yeah.
where outlines are required because you have to share what you're doing with everybody else in the writers' rooms and with the jerk off executives and whatnot. And and so I just have that in my bones. And I will say, for Everybody Knows and A Violent Masterpiece, which are very complicated, sort of Elroy-esque stories. I don't think anybody could write a story like that without outlining. Maybe I'm wrong. But I am feeling again, I think with the book that I'm getting ready to start, I want to try and break all of my like rules that I've built, just because I do feel myself getting kind of like doing the same things. And I kind of want to like go back to a body without organs and just have pure potential and start kind of and see what I can do from that. Because I think this next book is going to be very different from the last couple ones. So I'm looking forward to that. But I will say, I already know how the book ends.
Yeah.
And that's what I don't understand about pure pantsers is I always like, do you not think about what's going to happen next, or do you just ignore those thoughts?
So I am typically a pantser. I I mean, there was one book right out of college. I've told this story. I don't think I've told you, but like, I just graduated college. I was still living at home. I was working in a movie theater. I was like an assistant manager, so I was mostly working in the booth. I would take my laptop with me. I was subbing, and I wrote 90,000 words in 3 weeks, mostly just sitting down and just like not knowing anything, just having this, this first chapter in mind. And that
Hmm.
was something where just, and again, once I had, I think that first week and I realized like I had done like 30 some thousand words, I was like, okay, I want to just kind of keep this momentum going. But typically now, and I mean, I feel like, especially now that we are older and have more responsibilities, and like also we usually have contracts we have to deal with, like you really need to have a good solid idea at least. And I guess like I always go back to the Harlan Coben's, like it is like going on a road trip. You kind of have an idea where you're going to start, you know where you have a general idea of where you're going to end up, you have an idea of what that ending is going to be, but what happens along the way, yeah, like the characters might not end up going where you expect them to go. And that's always, I think, the
Hmm.
fun part. And I was just talking to David Ellis the other week where he talks about, he kind of does the same thing where he's more of a pantser, but there are times where then you kind of start heading down one direction, and like a couple chapters you might realize, oh shit, that's not going to work. So usually for me, I'm usually thinking a couple chapters ahead. Like I have a general idea, but I always
Hmm.
know it could change, and I love when it does change because I feel like if it surprises me, the author who is really inside this story and and in these
Hmm.
characters, then it's really going to surprise the reader. But at the same time, there are times where one of the books I had turned into a publisher, like I had to do an entire like act three rewrite. And,
Yeah.
and I mean, it kind of like had the same type of ending, but we had to like go to it from a different direction. So, I mean, sometimes it does bite you in the ass because you do have to end up doing it. But I mean, you did it. Like you said, it's just part of the job. I mean, you had to do it completely, and then, so that goes back to my next question. So you had already outlined this novel. You realized you have to do it from another point of view. That entire story, though, beat for beat, was kind of the same, right? You just had to kind of like come at it from a different point of view and kind of like, you know what I mean? Like, right? Like, it wasn't like there was a huge change in the story.
No, and in fact, I think I was pretty much capable of going chapter by chapter and saying, okay, just like rewrite this chapter from her point of view. What's it do? And keep going. And I don't think I really had to change very much from a plot perspective. And again, there were chapters from Polly's point of view. There just weren't very many.
Yeah.
And so, and I kept some of the Nate point of view chapters for times when Polly wasn't around or to tell his backstory and things like that. So, but even doing that, giving less of him, let me make him a more interesting character. The other thing about that first draft is Nate was not very interesting. I had ended up writing kind of a flat, tough guy, who like I think I was like projecting that toxic masculinity that doesn't let emotion out, but the result of that had resulted in kind of a flat character, which is a risk if you don't do that right. The man with no name can very easily just become the man who's not there. And so, I mean, I had also done that, and by limiting his sort of like point of view screen time, I was able to kind of concentrate the most interesting things about him that I had written through the whole book and kind of concentrate them and play those out so that I think the Nate of the finished book is a much more complicated character than probably the one who was the main narrator of the book.
Yeah. And so we talked about this again last time, but one of those things I really like that you did in this book, and also everybody knows, is it's not just chapter 10. It's chapter 10. Then we have, who the character is, whose point of view we're in, which is I think more of a common thing nowadays. I mean, Robert Crais does that a lot. In his more recent books. I think even Michael Connelly has started doing that a lot more. I mean, a lot it is popping up a lot more, and I think crime fiction is one of those things you often see in like, psychological suspense because oftentimes it's like first person narrative from different point of views. So you definitely
Hmm.
have to have who the person's name was. But on top of that, then you put like the location. So like Antelope Valley, like Nate, Antelope Valley, which and I think I may have asked you this before, but like, is that kind of coming over from like working in TV where it's like, this is where the scene is, this is where we are.
I think maybe, that might have been where the germ of it came from. But for me, and I have continued to do that in my other novels, it also came from my like intention to really explore the intense variety of locations that are in Southern California specifically.
Yeah.
That you can have so many things like Antelope Valley, and then you can have, Huntington Beach, and then you can have Fontana, and then you can have Beverly Hills. And even if you don't know what that means, if you've never been to Southern California, you don't know what a lot of those names mean. It doesn't matter because I find that place names are evocative, even if they're meaningless to you. I think that's true of anything you read. Like, there's something evocative about place names and the specificity of them, I think is really important. So I do think while it might have been something I was kind of gleaning from TV, I think it really has been something I've done in this book, Last King of California, I do it and Everybody Knows, and then I do it again in A Violent Masterpiece,
Well, Last King
is
California, you do not do it
I don't do
because
it.
we
Oh, that's right,
discussed
because they
about
don't go
that.
anywhere. Thank
Because
you.
it's primarily all, I mean, they do kind of go a little places, but it's not like with She Rides Shotgun, everybody knows where they're all over. Yeah, where they're like all over the place.
I need to revisit my own work. But no, you're
I
right.
could
I
be
don't
wrong.
do
Let
it
me
in
double
that one.
check.
No, no, I think you're probably right because they don't really they would be
Yeah.
pointless in that book. They just don't go enough places.
You know what? And it is interesting. And actually, I think we may have discussed this last time. And if not, well, we're going to discuss it again because you do the same thing in Last King of California. I don't know if you do it and everybody knows. But basically, you have a prologue, but you don't call it a prologue. It's zero. Well, it's in at least Last King of California, it's like chapter zero. In Shirai Shotgun, it's just zero because we don't have like chapters before the numbers.
Yeah,
What's the thinking behind that again? I mean, it's very interesting.
I'm, I think, there's the famous piece of writing advice to not do prologues, which I think is bad writing advice. I think most writing advice is bad writing advice. I genuinely do, because here's the thing. Don't do a prologue unless it's great. Like,
No, I agree. I mean, I love Elmore Leonard, but some of his 10 rules, it's like,
yes.
well, I mean, again, it's all case by case basis.
Well, that's why it all falls apart. It all writing advice, 95% of writing advice that is in any kind of like a technical level is two things. First of all, there's always exceptions. And B, almost all writing advice is reactionary to the period in which the writing advice is given. So, by which I mean there must have been an era where people were really overusing the shit out of adverbs, right? Because it became this like rule upon rule that like you cannot use adverbs in fiction, which is like a ludicrous, it's a stupid rule. It's an entire like section of language that we're just going to throw out. And we did it not because adverbs are bad, but because somebody at some period of time was abusing it. Same with like using anything other than said in dialogue. Um, Again, yes, you have seen in fiction from like maybe the 60s or 70s, people really overdoing the he exclaimed, he chortled. I don't
He
think I'll ever write anything
ejaculated.
where
What are you
he
doing? He
ejaculated.
ejaculated.
We all love that. Sherlock Holmes is always ejaculating. Um, and and again, like, that's fine. But like again, I don't think I'll ever have somebody chortle something. But are we really going to shut down this whole category of language, this whole thing of words, just because at one point somebody overdid it? And I think for almost any piece of writing advice like that, they are not giving an eternal rule. They're having a reaction to something that is currently being overdone. In Hollywood, you see it with voiceover. People say, "Oh, don't use voiceover; it's hacky." What they mean is there was a period of time where you would have a lot of things of like you'd show a guy smiling, and then you'd hear, "That's Frank. He's my best friend. He's a bit of a nut, but you can count on him when the going gets rough." Like, yeah, that's bad. But are you going to tell me that Goodfellas is bad? Are you going to tell me Taxi Driver is bad? Like, it's ludicrous. And again, so don't use voiceover is really it's bad advice, and don't use a prologue is bad advice. Um, but I do think there was something in me that I don't really like the word. I don't like having a word start a chapter
Mhm.
necessarily. I think I do in Shirai Chagan I have an interlude.
Yes,
Um
and I want to talk about that.
and so maybe it's not even about the word, but I just think maybe it was like, okay, people don't like prologues, I won't call it a prologue, but it'll be a prologue.
Yeah, it's prologue. Absolutely. Yeah, I don't, yeah, there's oftentimes you need a prologue. You need some type of setting up. You need some type of like, consider from a TV perspective, a cold opening to kind of
Yeah.
really pull in, the reader. Speaking of voiceover, I saw this, I think it was on Instagram or something like that. Someone had basically posted like, 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 like scenes of Dexter
Mm.
without his voiceover. So it's someone talking to him, and then he's just like, the camera's just
Standing
on him,
there.
and it's like it's just almost very creepy or very awkward of just like him just like and it's like I never really realized that Dexter doesn't really talk much because all that stuff is just always in his head. But yeah, so let's talk about the interlude because I remember this in the book and um it's a very fascinating. I mean, I know why you did it, but I still like to have the conversation where it's like because like ultimately kind of like the final climax of the book takes place in this area.
Yeah.
And but you had to, of course, introduce it in a way to the reader. So we see it, we're kind of introduced that as an interlude, kind of like the middle of all of this stuff. And because obviously I feel like, had you just done like a chapter, it wouldn't have felt right because this is a character that we're only going to like see once. So like it makes
Yeah.
more sense to do an interlude. And of course, you're introducing this in fact, what was it called? The high desert hang tree, which
Yeah.
is like this, I don't want to give anything away, but it's like this place that all these guys are at. Um, I don't know. It's just like where did that idea come in? And was that part of maybe part of having worked in TV, or just this idea where it kind of, like, yeah, I don't know. Like, do you just want to? Is there anything you want to say about the interlude? Because I felt it very interesting, and like it works because obviously, it pays off in the end. But yeah, I don't know. Is
No.
there anything about the interlude you
I
want
mean,
to talk
I
about?
I think what you said is pretty much the core of it, which is that I knew that the way I had structured the story, there was going to be this climax where Nate went after somebody who had nothing to do with him. Um, which, they approach in a different way in the film, and understandably, it's a film, you got to kind of streamline things. But what I had done was like I wanted the big showdown to take place. Well, basically, the problem that I had created was the person who had in my novel ordered the green light was in prison, untouchable by Nate, without some kind of really corny, like Nate commits a crime and gets sentenced to jail and then winds up at the same prison and then winds up getting it put into solitary confinement. And so I needed a way to have him have a climax that was realistic and somehow bring down this guy in prison. There's a lot of machinations. Anyway, it wound up where I had this place they were going to wind up, and a villain that I wanted to introduce before, yeah, like you said, before we meet them. And so it just felt very natural to me. I also very much like a chapter that feels like a short story. I really do. I like those, and I continue to write them. They're in Last King of California, less so, I think, in my Hollywood books. But I liked coming up with a character and being able to like dispose of the character in an interlude. And whether or not it came from TV, look, The Mentalist was for me like getting a master's degree they paid me for, and that master's degree is in plotting, in structuring, in how storytelling works, and The Mentalist is very different than anything I write, but like a show like The Mentalist is as mechanically sophisticated as any kind of story. And it's like a Swiss watch. And so once you learn how to do that, you kind of learn how to tell complicated stories. And so I think whether or not I directly learned that from TV, absolutely my concept of like how to do timing and structure is something that comes from television.
Yeah, I mean, this novel is actually, I'm looking up right now on Kobo because you probably don't remember. How many words would you say this is?
Oh, it's like 55,
Let's see.
maybe
Kobo
60.
usually can give yeah, well, it's saying about 56,000. The
That's
ebook
it.
might include, who knows what. But I mean, still, like, I feel it's probably that way because of you having worked in TV and stuff like that, if that makes sense. Whereas opposed to I felt, like you could like, another writer could have written this and probably, it would have been padded. It would have had scenes that weren't needed. It could have, you know what I mean, like a lot of other stuff, if that makes sense. So I definitely kind of see that aspect. Like it doesn't surprise me, that you have worked in TV, having read your stuff, because it is so tight. It is, like we aren't having these extra scenes that don't lead anywhere, that aren't like needed.
Yeah, I think one thing that TV teaches you, and there are varying opinions on this, is like I really do want to think that I am conscious of the audience and wanting to keep them aboard. And I think with Shirai Shotgun, to your point, it is very tight and lean. Now, then my book that'll be out next year, Violent Masterpiece, is almost literally twice as long as Shirai Shotgun. But it's a much bigger, crazier story, and I hope that none of the scenes in that are extraneous either. It's just a much, much bigger story. But I do believe that like I don't just write for me. I write for a reader who is not me. Because anybody who says they don't do that, it's like, well, then why did you publish it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that whole like I just write for myself. I don't care about. It's like shut up.
no, I mean, I think there's the version of that that is good, which is I write exactly the books I want to write. Like that is flat out, I write exactly the books I want to write. I do not think about marketing. I do not think about what people want. Like, but that's different than like trying to make your books fun. Because the truth is, a book that has not been read by anybody other than the author, in my opinion, literally doesn't exist. It's just
Yeah.
paper and pulp. Because a novel doesn't occur on the page and it doesn't occur in the mind of the author. It happens in this liminal space between the reader and the book. Like there is a space where it's not in your head totally and it's not in the book totally. It happens here. And that can't happen with the author. And so a book that hasn't been read by somebody else doesn't exist, is my
Yeah.
belief.
Yeah, no, that's well put. So, all right, well, let's get to the movie. So you published this. When was this optioned? Was this option pre-pub or was it after it came out?
Oh no, it was option pre-pub. I have the first draft of a script I wrote for this was 2016.
Okay, so
Um,
you had already adapted it yourself even before it got optioned?
no.
Or
I mean, like, I
okay.
think I started working on it. I think we optioned it pre-pub, and I started working on it well before it was published. And so I have drafts of the screenplay that were completed, I think, pretty close to publication. I just mean like my very first like files on the movie
Yeah.
are from
So, and then
2016.
for some kind of like, inside baseball for people's like, oftentimes, like when a book gets optioned, and this isn't always the case. Now, obviously, you had that screenwriting background, but sometimes authors will push to try to adapt their own work, mostly because even if they don't end up using that script, that author is still going to get paid decently, whatever the minimum is from the Writers Guild. So, and if it does get used, they would get a lot more. But I mean, like you were definitely going to get, because like an option can be 5,000, 10,000. You know what I mean? Like the option can be just whatever, which is still, nice money, but even just doing a draft of the script is going to be, a lot more money. So, and then sometimes, like I remember, I don't know if we had talked about this before, but I'm sure a mutual friend, Dwayne Swarzynski, had told me one time, like I think it was one of his novels. It came down to two different studios. Only one studio would let him adapt the script, and of course they went with that because there's going to be a lot more. Nothing really ever came of it. Because that's another thing too. When we talked before, a lot of stuff gets optioned, not a lot of stuff gets made. Obviously this got made, which is great, but my understanding is they did not end up using your script, correct?
No, that's correct. I, for all the reasons you said, I did really want to adapt this myself. And I thought that because I had so much experience in television, I was fairly well qualified to do so. Um, I wrote multiple drafts with the first production company that optioned it, and then that option ran out, and I chose to take it elsewhere, and it wound up where it wound up. Thanks to a producer named Nate Madison, who I had a meeting with, and he said, "Well, we're looking for." He'd read a script of mine that wasn't anything like She Writes Shotgun, and he's like, "We love this, but this is just a crime script, and we're looking for a crime script that has like a protagonist who isn't a criminal." And I had a copy of She Writes Shotgun in my book bag, and I pulled it out and pushed it across the table. I said, "So this is what you want," and he loved it and optioned it, and that's what started the path to getting the movie made. And I wrote a couple of drafts with them, but by then this was several years later, and I had written multiple drafts, and I was getting a little tired of it, and I wasn't interested in doing the kind of changes that, frankly, books need to get turned
Yeah.
into film. I learned that about myself is I like the book. I wrote the book. If I'm writing a screenplay about my book, it's going to be like the book. Um, and so the producers and I kind of mutually agreed, like, maybe somebody else should come in and take over. And I'm very fine with it. And to the point that I'm not interested in adapting my other work. I am really just gonna let them go from the beginning to other people.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think oftentimes a lot of adaptations are not exact copies of the actual book. I think like the very first Harry Potter movie was probably like almost beat for beat what the book was, but most adaptations for reasons that go into just the production costs or whatever else, they can't do everything, and also time. I mean,
Yeah.
for the longest time, things were just movies. Now, obviously, now streaming has become a big thing. You might have a novel that is adapted into like, an 8 episode, where you can actually fit in more of the character stuff. But can you talk a little bit about just, oh, and what I was going to mention was, I think it was John Grisham has always said that, what Stephen King had told him, the movies or movies, TV shows complete like they do not affect your work. Your book stands
Yeah.
alone. The movies, TVs are completely separate. You have to just kind of, as an author, I'm sure it's tough to like separate, to like kind of separate that. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, no, your book is the book and it's never going to change. But can you talk about like just, yeah, the process of just adapting your own stuff? Because obviously you're then taking it from a book into a completely different medium where you have to what a script has to be what like it's like every page is like a minute, so like you're looking at like 90 to 120 page script. I mean, and clearly you're not gonna be able to like fit everything in there, so like I don't know like how and then how long does that typically take you? I mean, like you said, like you've kind of like have a master class in like script writing, so I imagine it's probably easier for you to kind of maybe do that or maybe not.
I mean, again, I sometimes it is and sometimes it is, and I'm writing a screenplay right now that is not related to my fiction. And um, you get 12 weeks, and I think I'm on week 19 right now of my 12-week deadline. But so I'm not always the fastest person. Again, I think the first time, the first drafts were pretty easy for me because I had written the book and I think I wrote, and I think the scripts I wrote were good and I think you could have filmed them. But that doesn't mean that they were like within budget to your point or anything like that. I think my first draft was probably something closer to The Godfather than the 2 hour film that I don't mean that in quality, I mean in like length.
Yeah,
Than what they ended up doing. And I didn't think about budget at all. I just, I wrote big montages. It was set in LA, it was set in the high desert. It was all over the place. I wrote everything. I had the big prison scenes. Like I did all of it. And that's fine. But again, that's not what you do. And to your like you were saying, or what I was saying at the beginning of this when I saw Nick and Taryn talking about the film is understanding really that it has nothing to do with me. Like it has to do with the book, and it's great and it's an honor, but like that is theirs. And so I mean, again, it was fun at first to adapt myself, but I think as the realities of what were required of it sank in, I understood that my time is better spent writing the next book, because I'm not the right person. This is my canned joke line about it, forgive, is you don't adapt yourself for the same reason that you don't operate on yourself, which is that you have to be able to make cuts without pain.
Hmm.
And that was the thing I wasn't really willing to do. Not I wasn't like a Hollywood uh, dick nose throwing chairs or anything. I would never kind of push past the essential locked structure of the novel. And I know in my heart, I know that that's what you have to do. I mean, you go look at LA Confidential, amazing adaptation. Brian Hegland did the violence to that novel that needed to be done to get it onto the screen. And Elroy doesn't like that movie, but like I
It's a great
do.
movie. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's
Yeah.
definitely, yeah, it's definitely, and I mean, again, going back to, She Rides Shotgun specifically, it's such a tight book where I feel like, you write very cinematically. You're probably thinking about it, seeing it almost as a movie or TV show. So like the scenes are there, so it makes sense, you would want to adapt it, what's there, because that's, whereas opposed to some novels that are like 500 pages that have a lot of padding, it's like, no, you don't need, all this time, and I don't know. Um, so I want to talk about it was a really sweet picture you had posted about the teddy bear. Can you talk
Mm.
about that?
Yeah. I so I the bear is a very important character in the novel. Shirai Shotgun is Polly's stuffed bear and basically her tulpa that she has like turned into a um not living thing but a true thing. And that bear is based on my childhood teddy bear that I have kept all these years, and it's literally on the couch over there. And so I made the somewhat crazy decision to fly my childhood teddy bear to New York for essentially the premiere of She Rides Shotgun, so that I could have a picture taken with Anna Sophia Hegger, the amazing, again, amazing actress who plays Polly. And I just was like, I want a picture with my teddy bear and Polly. It's the most surreal, weird, layered thing that I think I've ever done in my life. It is the whole process of having your film adapted and being a thing that exists in the world is so bizarre, but I decided to push it to a much more bizarre place and like have Anna hold my teddy bear and just like it's this weird closed circle moment in my life. And I do think, I recently came to understand that the bear in the novel does for Polly what fiction does for me. And in fact, I didn't intend this. This is a personal thing that I don't think anybody would read the novel and go, well, clearly the bear is fiction. But the bear is fiction. He is true but not real. He like is this way for this girl who doesn't know how to connect with the world completely. It's her way of doing it through this artificial thing, through like creating a thing that isn't real, but is able to express emotion and express some connection to the world that she is incapable of doing on her own. And so I had that realization and I had it while I was in New York, like while all this was happening, because I was like, this is really fairly weird and heavy. And from the very beginning, the bear was something that was locked in from nearly the beginning. I knew what I wanted to happen with the bear. And so it was really important to me. Like it like really is like a meaningful aspect of the story to me. And so it was just, and also I think it was something I was doing, and I still try to do this to differentiate myself from any of like the more kind of macho overtones that used to pollute crime fiction more than they do now. But still, it was important to me to say I can write this like really violent, brutal, bloody story, and I can put a teddy bear in it, and you will cry about the teddy bear, and that's, I think in one way or another, very big part of my work. And so yeah, it was really important to me.
Yeah. What other stuff had she done? The actress that plays Polly, or is
She's
this one
done
of like
very
her
little.
first things?
Yeah, I haven't actually seen anything else she's done. She has been in at least one other movie. She had taken some time off acting, which she talks. It's so funny because she talks like, she's like 40. She's like, I took a little time off. I'm like, you're 10. Like, or she's 11 now, but she was 10 when she shot the movie. I'm like, yeah, what do you mean you took time? You don't take time off. You're a kid. Like, but she's the sweetest little girl, and I'm very happy for her and her family. Her parents are wonderful because not all screen, parents of child actors are wonderful, but they seem amazing, and she seems very well suited to handle what is happening. Like she goes and does press stuff with Taryn and is like very cool and collected and like she's really impressed. I really, Taryn's amazing. Nick Rowland does a terrific job with the film. There's a lot of talent involved with the movie, but she is the thing people will talk about. She is, Florida Project, Natalie Portman. Like she is delivering one of those kind of performances where like I don't want to jinx anything, but if she got an Oscar nomination, I would not personally be shocked.
So we would equate this to like the professional.
Yeah, yeah, I'm saying like it's that level of performance. It's
Yeah.
just where it's a different performance. I mean, Natalie Portman is playing a child who is already aged beyond her years.
Yeah.
And that is not what Anna is playing. Anna is playing a little girl who is in the process of losing her innocence over the course of the movie. And the thing about her is you just never see her acting. I mean, most child actors, you can see the acting going on. And she just feels like a little girl in the world. It's really, I mean, considering the heaviness of what she does in the film, it's really remarkable.
So the first time you saw it, was it at the premiere or had you seen like a cut previously? So that you basically were kind of pre-prepared because I'm sure it's weird as hell to then sit there and like see, I mean, I'm sure at the time when you were writing it, I don't know, like, I mean, even now, like, do you in the back of your head just always kind of have that idea, like, what if, like, oh, like it'd be cool if this, obviously, again, as writers, we almost always want stuff to, eventually be made into TV or movies. But like, are you able to kind of separate yourself that when you're writing it and just kind of focus on those characters, or in the back of your head, you're thinking like, like, oh, if they make this into a movie, this scene is going to be really cool.
Yeah, no, I don't think about that. I really don't. I don't, again, I don't make any decision based on that. I don't want my work to like if it gets turned into a movie, great. People say I write cinematically. I saw a lot of people say like about Sherry Shotgun, well, wow, this was like kind of written to be a movie. It really wasn't. It was written to be a novel. It's just that was like kind of the mood and tone I was in was to do something really fast paced and pulpy and punchy. But I don't think about stuff like that until it's done. And then again, I kind of just try and now I just let other people think about it. Sure, everybody knows is in development right now. And I can't give any details other than that. And but I have very much after finding like the writer director and finding the production company and agreeing to it, I have really wanted to be hands off and like and I think that's the way to do it. It's the way to
Are you like a consulting producer or like any type of EP, just some type of involvement that way?
I mean, I might have an EP credit to be honest, but like
But you have nothing to do with it, not
yeah,
even like
again, I
checking in,
really
not reading scripts, nothing like that.
no, they asked me at one point if I wanted to read the script. I said it's not necessary. Like I don't
Yeah.
I really again, Sherry Shotgun, I'm very proud of the finished film, but the finished film has to your point, other writers came in and did the script. I don't need to be involved. I need to be writing the next book. And I think because you kind of have two choices, or three. One is you let go. Two is you become a total control freak and control every aspect so it's exactly the way you dreamed it in your head. And you're going to have screaming matches and you're going to, probably take 25, 30 years to get it made because you have to be a part of it and you won't let go. And the third thing is that you kind of try and muddle through the middle of that, but it's just going to get away from you if you muddle through. So again, for me, I don't want to be a control freak. I don't want to like wrestle this thing down. I want to write the next book. And like I said, I'm writing a screenplay right now. It has not based on my fiction. It's a pure new idea that I sold to a film company on a pitch, and I'm having fun with that. But the idea of adapting myself is a totally different beast. And I just think for me, I would rather just let go and stick to the realm of like the novel where you can type anything you want. You can write anything you want. And that's a beautiful thing. And it's superior in my mind to the other stuff for that reason.
Yeah. Like I think Lee Goldberg had said something along the lines of when his stuff gets optioned, he's always like tells them, I will be as involved as you want me to be involved. And it's, 99% of the time it's like, okay, see ya.
Yeah.
Here's the check, and then they go. So, all right, well, let's move on to a few other things because we're coming up on the hour. So, I talked about your short story, My Savage Year. We talked about this last time. It was published in Southwest Review, was reprinted in Best American Mystery Suspense 2004 or 24 last year. Uh, Correct me if I'm wrong. This was like your first short story in a long time, right? Or at
Yeah,
least your
probably.
first published short story in a long time.
I mean, I think it was literally my first short story since whenever I published Christmas Morning Coming Down, um, which I published in the Cruel Yule anthology from Thuglit. And then I think I had a thing I did when the Malmans, when Kate and Dad and Malman did their anthology series. I adapted a piece of the Last King of California back when I thought that was an unfinished novel that wasn't going to get published. I adapted that into a short story for them, but this was the first like new short story I had written in a very long time. Yeah.
Right. And then so uh, where was I going with that? I guess the question is like, are you planning on trying to write more short fiction? Like is there going to be an eventual collection that people can look forward to?
I would like to. I think what I'm leaning more towards, and if the pitchforks gather, I understand, is probably something closer to a collection of novellas. I really
Hmm.
haven't had an idea that was going to make a 5 or 6 page short story. Like my brain is very removed from that
Yeah.
at this point in time. And I recently unearthed something that I wrote in 2012 that is again closer to novella length. I think it's about 18,000 words. That's better than I remembered it, and I really kind of want to clean it up. But the truth is my time goes to either things that I still need to work for money in Hollywood. Hopefully someday that will cease. and then I'm ready to start the next novel. I just really am trying really hard to focus on these novels because it's what I like best, and I'm not very fast at it, and I am not an old man, but you get older and you realize that there is a finish line out there, and the number of novels you are capable of is diminishing every time you don't write one, if you know what I mean. And I had a thing last year where I had a shitty work situation that I kind of came out the other side of it saying, I think that just cost me a novel.
Yeah.
Like I think the amount of time and energy I put into that, I could have written a novel. And so that's like one less novel I'm going to write in my life. And I'm really trying to avoid that feeling. So I really am focusing more on the novels now.
So with My Savage Year, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I know you said you're really proud of the story, which you should be. It's a great story. Um, it wasn't initially a short story, right? You tried to make it more of a script, or can you talk about just kind of like a little bit of the back of that background?
I mean, again, I think the thing that's coming out of this conversation is it sometimes takes me decades to finish things. I think
Yeah.
um, it wasn't called My Savage Year at the time, but I think My Savage Year was my second novel that I ever wrote after I wrote The Cool Hand War. Um, and somewhere out there, and I have lost it, I have to be honest, I have lost somewhere there is 40 or 50,000 words of a Savage Year novel
Oh, wow.
that didn't work. And so I let it die, and then I tried it as a novella and couldn't quite get there. And then I tried to sell it as a TV show. I talked to a pretty cool network about it for a little while before they backed off of it. And there's a little bit about that in the story. Um, and and then again, Bill Boyle approached me because they were doing a noir issue of Southwest Review, and I thought to myself, well, this again, if I can force a deadline onto myself, then I will have to finish this. And that's what happened. So I'm grateful to Bill. And that's kind of what let me finally push through and put an end to it. Because I can, as obvious, I can let things kind of lie fallow for a long time. And it's good to have a reason to dig stuff up.
Yeah. And again, going back to a deadline, it always helps having a deadline, because I sometimes feel like as writers, we put on these superficial deadlines, but at the same time, we know like, it doesn't really mean anything if we miss it. Whereas opposed to a publisher's like, we need this by a certain date, and you're like, okay, shit, I really need to get this done. Um, so the interesting thing about this short story, and everyone should go check it out. Again, it's been reprinted in the Best American Mystery Suspense last year. Sean Cosby was the guest editor. Um, so it's like there's portions that are based on real life, and then you fictionalize certain things or whatever else. One of the things I was pitching a TV show once, a supernatural crime story about a drug that is also an alien that takes over a town in California high desert. Like,
Well, yeah, that's a
is that
different TV
true?
show. Yeah, that's true. Here's something I will say about that story that I've never heard anybody. I've heard people talk about the story, and they will refer to the narrator.
Mhm.
And here's my question that I would, if anybody has read it or wants to reread it or hasn't read it, what if there isn't a narrator? What if there's just me?
I mean, so yeah, I mean, for me, I was seeing I don't want to say necessarily metafiction, but it's one of those like, this is something, there are portions of this stuff that took place that was true, but you were also kind of like fictionalizing a little bit of it. But I
Well,
saw
yeah,
you
but
more as a character, but it wasn't like nonfiction. It wasn't like a little like memoir short story. Like you were, fictionalizing certain aspects of it. And correct me if
yeah,
I'm wrong. Again, that was
no,
my
no, no. I mean, obviously,
interpretation.
if you get to the end of the story, there's stuff in there that like no, I did not do the
Yeah.
last thing that I do in the story. But I do say at the beginning of the story that I'm going to lie to you about it now.
Yeah.
And then there's a point where I say I'm done lying to you. And so I
But at
think
the same
that's
time, as a reader, even though you're telling me I'm done lying to you, we can't really take that at face value.
well, you can't or you don't have to.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, I kind of think of it as it is metafiction in a lot of ways, and all stories are lies, right? Like they're all lies. I just think mine is a little more honest because it tells you it's a lie. Um, and then stops telling you that. So yeah, the thing I wrote about that's a totally different script there called Holy Mountain, California, that I wrote about a drug that is also an alien that I failed to sell as a TV show. That's all
And
true.
that did the executive actually ask you that question about like what's the difference? And you know, they were like, what's the difference between horror and terror? And you give
Yeah,
a
yeah.
response, and then you end
I
up
mean,
like,
again, like I'm not sure I'm sure I didn't word it quite as neatly, but yeah, I
right,
mean,
right,
yeah.
right. Okay.
So there's a lot of that story that is very factual, and I think everything that takes place in like the now as opposed to the past is, I think, I
How
say this
much,
cautiously because I should review it, but I think it's all true.
yeah. How much stuff have you like pitched in your life in TV film? I mean,
When I talk,
and like, do you keep your pitches somewhere? Like, if you on your computer, do you have like a whole list of like, you know,
yeah, I mean, I find pitching really depressing. I don't like to do it, and again, it's one of the things I'm trying to quit in my life is going to people for permission to tell stories as opposed to just telling them. And so, I have a couple of little things. Obviously, LA Confidential was a big one for me. That was a big pitch. Holy Mountain, California was a big thing I took out. And then the thing I took out um, that I'm really sad about is a pilot called Rat Kings, which is my favorite thing I've ever written in TV. And I wrote an entire manifesto for it, not just a pitch, but like an artistic manifesto for television. Um, and I teamed up with just like a brilliant director named Karan Kusama, who has directed lots and lots of great movies, including Destroyer, Jennifer's Body.
mm,
Truly great director, and we took it out as a pitch right at the beginning of the pandemic, and were unable to sell it. Because you asked if I keep everything, I actually reread my Rat King's manifesto the other day, and I was very, very happy with it. And I'm very sad that one did not become a TV show.
yeah, but I guess at the same time, nothing's ever, I mean, nothing's necessarily ever dead. You could always revisit that in the future, or maybe, who knows?
I don't know. I do a lot of meetings with executives where they go, "Boy, we love Rat Kings." And I said, "Well, it could." We did sell it. We sold it to. We had a production company, so I don't own it any longer. It belongs to the production company because they paid
Mm.
me, and then we went out and pitched it to try and sell it to TV, and that's the part where it fell apart. And so it is kind of locked into like
Oh, yeah.
a thing. And again, that's not the worst story because I did get paid for it. It's the pitching where you go out and do something that takes you 6 months, and then at the end of it, nobody buys it, and you don't own anything any longer because it's not a book. Like a book, if you write a book and literally nobody wants to publish it, then you can publish it. Like there are avenues for you in books that there are very, very, very few indie TV productions in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, an author friend of mine, and I'm trying to remember, I'd done a live stream with him before. I don't know if we had talked about it publicly, so I don't want to name him, but he has he has he basically has been writing these novellas with the idea of trying to sell it, but he publishes them as like a 99-cent ebook, so
Yeah.
that way he owns that IP. So if they do, option it or whatever else and nothing else, like he still owns it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, that is a trend right now in Hollywood is the people optioning short stories. Unfortunately, the kind of short stories they option aren't anything you or I would recognize as a short story. It's really and
It's,
I'm not talking
it's
about
just
your
more of a
friend here.
pitch because all they want is
It's
the
just a
idea.
pitch. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have learned that I am incapable of writing those.
All right. So, all right. So let's go on real quick. And a violent masterpiece. Obviously, the book comes out next year. We don't have to really go into it. What can you? I mean, pitch wise. I mean, what can you tell us? Is there anything like? Can you give us like a quick, like minute pitch regarding like what people look for? I mean, is this in the same universe as Everybody Knows?
It is. It is in the same universe, not in a way that where you would need to have read Everybody Knows. I think, there are definitely Easter eggs for people who have read Everybody Knows, but it is three new protagonists who are kind of caught up in this world, trying to keep their heads above the dirty water of Los Angeles. But it is a sort of the world of Everybody Knows cranked up to just like absolutely electric levels, I think partially because the world we live in feels like it's been cranked up to this like electric level. It's a very pulpy novel. It is. got there's a serial killer on the loose called the LA Ripper, and everybody nobody wants to admit how excited they are that there's a serial killer back in LA. Nobody wants to admit how much it matters that the he's killing pretty white women. There is a Hollywood pedophile who was arrested, and tells his defense attorney, I can give you all the dirt of, all the sickos in Los Angeles, including a murder. Um, and I don't think you have to be like, Jeffrey Epstein's attorney to guess what happens to that pedophile. And how that's connected to the LA Ripper is something you will find out in the course of the novel. There is a guy who's like a live streaming night crawler who goes down to South Central and chases the police scanner, but instead of doing like the night crawler thing of taking photos and selling it to the news, he's got subscribers and he's got live cams and he is going out,
Oh,
uh,
wow.
and he
That
kind of
that's a
narrates
very
a
realistic thing, definitely. I could absolutely see that happening. And I'm sure it does.
It
I'm
does
sure that is a
happen.
thing.
And what it has allowed me to do is he is also sort of like maybe like a Christian Slater and pump up the volume style a guy who runs at the mouth. So he is driving through South Central at high speed looking for crimes and kind of giving his philosophy on Los Angeles and power and darkness. And he gets drawn back into the world of Hollywood sleaze and is hired to be kind of a researcher for a blackmailer. But he begins to suspect that the men that he's been paid to dig up dirt on all have a connection that is darker than even what he's been paid to find. And it all swirls together. It's a very, again, it's an epic novel. It goes all the way from, homeless camps to billionaire orgies. There are a lot of drug abuse, a lot of sex, and it's called a violent masterpiece, partially so nobody can complain if they read it and they say this book is incredibly violent. It's like, well, it's right there on the cover, man. Like, what do you want from me?
And it's a great cover, by the way. So I know you
Thank
shared
you.
that recently. Everybody can go check out Jordan's social media pages. The thing is it up for? It's not up for pre-order yet, is
It
it?
is. Yes,
Is it up for
please.
pre-order? Okay, perfect.
And sometimes people ask, like, where should I pre-order from? What helps you the most? And the answer is pre-order it. Like, that's
Yeah,
what helps. And,
yeah.
and
Whatever's
again,
easiest for you.
nobody is responsible for helping my career. Just buy the books you want to buy. But if you are asking, I will tell you that like pre-orders lets everybody know that people are excited, and that's kind of what drives things. And that's not just for me, that's for anybody. Buy early, buy often.
Do you team up with any like local bookstore for like signed copies, pre-order copies?
I don't know if I've ever done pre-order online, but I should talk to them. My bookstore, kind of my home base, is Vroman's in
Ah,
Pasadena, which,
Romans. Yeah,
yeah, is the best bookstore in Los Angeles, in my opinion. It's where I've done all my events. Sean Cosby and I kind of have a routine set up where we do events for each other at Vroman's. We've done three now, two for his books and one for mine because he laps me because he's much faster than I am. Um, and I'm sure I will do something with them, and I can maybe talk to them about doing pre-signed. That would
yeah.
be a good idea.
And then in the time remaining, is there anything you've read, watched, listened to that you really did, that you really dug that you want to recommend?
I mean, that is such a huge question. Part of being a writer is absorbing things, and I am constantly reading. I mentioned Bill Boyle earlier. He turned me on to the poet Frank Stanford, and I am currently reading Frank Stanford's biography, and I picked up his like collected poetry as well. So like my laptop is currently lifted up slightly by my copy of the Life and Poetry of Frank Stanford. I mean, like this is not by any means planted. I'll just show you. Like, I got The Interpretation of Dreams by Sigmund Freud is right here. I've got this book called Infinite Greed: The Inhuman Selfishness of Capital. These are
Hmm.
the kind of things I read. I'm really excited about this one, The Fort Bragg Cartel, which is about special forces agents in the U.S. military involved in drug smuggling and murder. It's a mess of books. I watch a lot of movies. I go see movies in the movie theater a lot. That's a big pleasure of mine, particularly old movies, which I'm afraid is a comment on a lot of new movies, not She Ride Shotgun, which is, I think, still in maybe one or two theaters here in America, but will be on video on demand, and some streamer in some future that I'm not allowed to talk about by law. But it is out there, and I'm really proud of it. And I think something I've seen people say, forgive me for being a little pitchy here at the end, but people say, "Oh yeah, this is the kind of movie I missed." This is the kind of movie they have been making recently. These like, little small crime thrillers that have a lot of heart and a lot of artistic merit to them. So I'm very proud of the movie, and I hope people go see it and buy all my books and all that. But I myself, yeah, I watch and read pretty much constantly when I'm not writing and not spending too much time online.
What's the last old movie that you watched that you really liked?
Well, it's not that old, but the last movie that I saw at Vidiots, which is my local movie theater, 5 minutes from here, and I was there 4 times last week. So I saw The Fly. I saw RRR, the tremendous Indian film that came out
Oh
three or
yeah.
4 years ago. That's the most recent one. I saw As Tears Go by Wong Kar-wai, which is one of my favorite. I love the whole subgenre of sort of Hong Kong romance crime films that were being made in that era. A Moment of Romance. That is like the movie I'm championing for everybody right now. Is Andy Lau, uh, gorgeous Chinese movie star, is in this movie called A Moment of Romance, which is sort of a Bonnie and Clyde doomed doomed romance in the world of the Tongs in Hong Kong. And As Here Go By is a very similar film in a lot of ways. That's really my next book that I'm planning now is going to be something like that. And so I've been really spending a lot of time watching blood-soaked romances.
All right. Well, there you got it. Jordan, thank you again for making time to chat. It's always a pleasure.
Happy.
Obviously, the first novel, She Rides Shotgun, it looks like at least on most ebook platforms, at least in the United States, it's on sale right now. So if you don't want
Probably.
to, if you actually real quick,
Hmm.
because I've been trying to track down a hardcover. Well, I mean, whenever I'm in a used bookstore, I always look to see if there's any, because like the cover in that was so unique.
I
Like I
love the cover
liked
of She
it, but
Rides
it's
Shotgun.
also like it was just very like kind of chill for a book called She Rides Shotgun. Like, can you talk a little bit like because obviously, and for again, inside baseball for people, if the paperback cover is the same as the hardcover, it means that, the marketing feels pretty confident that, oh, the hardcover did decently. Usually when they switch it up, it means like the sales in the hardcover probably weren't great, so they want to kind of like switch it up. And again, that's not necessarily means it's the case here, but oftentimes that's what happens. So
Well,
like,
I'll tell you that was the case, but
well, I wanted to be the one to say it because I
uh,
didn't want to put you in that position, but like I don't know, like, yeah, can you talk a little bit about just those two covers real quick, just because this is more of a special shotgun or She Rides Shotgun episode?
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I will say, like, you don't get a lot of shots to like complain about covers, particularly when it's your first novel. They had submitted some stuff that I didn't like and pushed back on, and then they did the hardcover, which is again, I think when I have a very like kind of like indie sensibility that doesn't maybe always scream commercial, and I will admit that I love that cover, the hardcover for
Yeah,
She
no,
Rides Shotgun.
it's definitely, and what I love about it too is it's a cover like we didn't have to see a girl in a shotgun. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like these ideas where it's like, oh, the title is this, so we need to see it on the cover. It's like, no, 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 no. But it is a very, if I remember correctly, and I'm sure people can look it up, it's like it just is like the motel, right? It's like a kind of a green color of like a motel or something like that. Like
It's
it's
a
just it's
motel, and there's
very,
like a man in a hoodie kind of like leaving suspiciously, but it's very like
yeah.
it is very chill, and it is not, again, I think it's probably the most like quote unquote literary version of that story is that title. I think, and this isn't on Echo or anybody I've worked with, I'll just say in general, in my entire career, I think my position in what I've come to call art pulp, which is where that's what I choose to call what I do is art pulp, can be very difficult to market in a world that is very binary in a lot of ways. That thinks things are either pulpy commercial stuff or artsy highbrow stuff, and doesn't believe that those two things can coexist, whereas I fully believe they can. And I think getting that balance right is something that is very tricky in today's, again, very consumerist, capitalist-driven world. And I think of all of my book covers, the one that pulls that off is A Violent Masterpiece, where the only phrase I really remember saying to them was it needs to have neon gravitas. And I think that's exactly what it has.
Yeah.
And I think it does sell that it is like a pulpy, neon blood-soaked novel. But there's also still some kind of gravitas to it. So I think, you always want somebody to like kind of, you want a book cover to almost be a mirror in your heart. That's what your hope is in your heart. Like, is that somebody will show you a book cover and it'll be like, oh, you saw me, right? Like that's the author's hope is you saw me. And it's beautiful and people want to buy a million copies, but also that you saw me. This is perfect. And that's really hard to do, I think. And so I think the Shirai Shotgun cover is great. It just doesn't quite sell the pulp part of it. And then so
Yeah.
yes, there was a redo.
Yeah. And I mean, the nice thing, at least from a quote unquote marketing standpoint, is you always like when your name is really big. So, it's like
That is,
it's a very text heavy cover.
by the way, that's the biggest my name's ever been on anything. I don't think my name's that big anymore.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm looking at the other stuff. That's true.
I think that was more a design thing than like when it's like Stephen King and then like that's not really true. His titles are big too, but like I tease Sean about that. Like his name keeps getting bigger on those covers. But
Well, see, Sean was smart using the initials so that he has the name is fewer
yeah,
characters, whereas
yeah,
opposed to like for me, I have a very long last name. So it's
yeah,
like
yeah,
it's,
yeah.
but anyway. All right. Well, again, Jordan, it was great talking. Everyone, go check out the book if you've not read it. It's a great novel. The movie, it's out now. It's great. It's getting great reviews. At the very least, if you can't find it in theaters, pre-order it. The same thing, pre-order Jordan's novel or his next novel, A Violent Masterpiece. It's up for pre-order. And yeah, we'll see everybody next time. Bye.